and are able to do so on any topic that is on our agenda this evening. So at this time, we'd like to welcome any public comment from those in attendance. Yes, please come up to the microphone and identify yourself.
Hi. Oh, that is loud. My name is Lisa Barbaro. I'm here tonight as a teacher as well as a taxpayer. I've lived in Winchendon and worked in our schools for many years, in kindergarten and third grade at Memorial, and for the last 12 years at Toy Town. When I heard about the plan to restructure the schools, I was very surprised. The more I thought about it, the more I thought that it seemed like a bad idea. I've spoken to many other teachers who couldn't make it here tonight with the busyness of the holidays, but some of their ideas are included in what I'm saying to you tonight. Memorial School was built for our youngest students. It is bright and colorful and welcoming to our young ones who come to school for the first time. Memorial has bathrooms that are designed for small children, and even a couple of classrooms with private bathrooms for the very young children. The playgrounds are enclosed and fully visible to staff with age-appropriate equipment. Again, these were playgrounds that were built for small children that currently use them. The library at Memorial is another area that's easily accessible to the kids. Toy Town Elementary was originally built as a high school and has successfully housed our upper elementary students for many years. It provides a good transition for students moving from the lower elementary school, where they had cubbies and hooks for coats, to experiencing keeping their belongings in lockers, moving through the hallways throughout the school, and preparing themselves for moving on to middle school. Our library at Toy Town has recently been redesigned and upgraded to be perfect for our 3rd through 5th graders. It looks better than it's ever been for as long as I've been in the district. But it would have to be redesigned if the younger children were to use it and they came over. The shelves are way too high, and it's just not really an appropriate space for young ones. Toy Town has an auditorium that was just upgraded and a gym twice the size of Memorial's. Again, these things are better suited for the older elementary students. The playground at Toy Town, improved over the past years through fundraising efforts, is great for our 8 to 11-year-old students. There are large open areas, swings, basketball court, and structure, all built for students at this age level. This year, a path was added for our walkers to safely exit the school. If the school was to become a preschool and kindergarten, the playground would need to be completely refitted and fenced in, as there are areas that are not always visible to staff, and the playground equipment would not be suitable for the smaller children. Murdoch is a beautiful school for our older students, but there are issues that make it less than suitable for our 5th graders. 5th graders enjoy and need outdoor recess with a playground.
Ms. Barbaro, sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to let you know you have 1 minute left.
Got it. That's fine. When Toy Town students were housed there during the pandemic, we were forced to use the courtyard to play. Use of the fields was initially allowed but taken away because of the damage done to the fields. 5th grade students are also far less socially and emotionally mature than the 6th to 8th graders that are at the middle school, and even more so with the high schoolers that they would have to share a bus with. The pandemic has only widened this gap. The restructuring would also cause turmoil for staff, who would also be subjected to moving everything to other buildings. For Toy Town teachers, this would be the 3rd move in 3 years, as well as a change in work schedules for our 5th grade teachers, who would now become middle school teachers instead of elementary teachers, which can look quite different as far as subjects taught. And there are a number of questions of what this might look like for them, as well as for our new specialists. In closing, I feel this change would create many challenges and stress for students and staff, wasted space at at Toy Town, and many additional costs for necessary building changes. Perhaps instead we could use that money to help close the gaps created by the pandemic. At the very least, more time should be taken to consider the drastic change and possibly get input from stakeholders before voting on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for those comments. So obviously, well organized and thought out and really constructive feedback. So that is very, very helpful. Appreciate that so much. Other comments? Yes. Is the program being live streamed? Indeed it is, yes.
It is, she can't see it.
It is on the public access station, and we'll check on that for you.
If you can check on the live stream, 'cause she can't, she doesn't have cable, so.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I think I was using a term that was different than what you were. I think our program is available on the public access station. I don't believe it is live streamed. My apologies for the mistake.
It is live streamed generally. We're just curious if it is.
On the town website, it's supposed to be being live streamed.
And also, are you able to make this a hybrid meeting?
No,
No.
Why?
no, well, that's been sorry, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Larry, you're welcome to. Go ahead.
We've been asking for that.
You can, with that owl right there, then you can do that. for
Well,
that other-
we were told we can't.
do that with that as well.
So sorry for the delay. The response from our technical support is that the live stream has not been working for a couple of months, and so it is not available for this meeting or other meetings, but I understand it is being worked on to be corrected. Sorry about that. Other comments?
My name is Kayla Main. I'm a resident and a taxpayer here in this town. I have one child in this school. I have one child that I school choice out, and one child that used to attend this school system. I have lots of questions, and I'm sure some of these questions will be answered when you guys talk about it. How is busing going to work? Our buses are full already, and now you want to add a whole nother grade to our high school busing? And you want 10-year-olds with 17 and 18-year-olds? It's not appropriate. It's not okay. How are the playgrounds going to look? I know that teacher touched on it. Can't have preschoolers at the Toy Town School. We just spent how much money on that playground? And now we want to revamp it? It's a lot of taxpayer money wasted and school money being wasted. How's the staffing going to look? We're still running Toy Town as a school. We're still going to need 4 principals, 4 assistants, all the janitors. We're still heating the same school, so why are we changing it? Parent pickup lines. That's a hot mess already, and now we want to add more parent pickups to that line. There's a lot of questions, and a lot of parents have concerns already, and I think the schools should be focusing on the education of our children and the educations that they've lost, that they've been robbed of, and not about switching schools because who knows why. There's lots of questions, and I wish there could be questions after you guys address it so we can ask further questions that may not be addressed during your speeches.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Just pausing for a moment to make sure there isn't anyone else that'd like to make a public comment tonight. And not seeing any. All right, thank you very much to our two speakers this evening. We appreciate that. The next item on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda. In your packet to the school board members, you have 2 sets of minutes, one from our November 3rd meeting and one from our November 17th meeting. I believe these were in email a little while ago. And I am just realizing, because we're about to take our first vote perhaps, that I did not mention that all of our school committee members are here this evening except for one. Our student representative could not be with us this evening. She had a personal matter that interfered with this evening, and so she could not be here. But we do have all of our members, including on the phone, we have our member Alicia, Representative Alicia Jordan. Any discussion on the consent agenda, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Greg?
I'd move that we approve the entire consent agenda as presented.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Not hearing any. We'll take a roll call vote. Karen?
I'm abstaining, I wasn't present.
Thank you. And Larry?
aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And Alicia?
Aye.
Thank you. And the chair votes aye. That is 4 ayes and 1 abstention, and the motion passes. I do not believe that we have a student representative report this evening because Angelina could not be with us, and we wish her the best in what she's doing this evening. So that brings us to our superintendent's report and the budget update. Mr. King?
Sure, thank you. So a couple of updates relative to the budget. So first, I'll start with sort of my traditional update. I believe you have the year-to-date. This is actually for November in your packets. And then as well, Ms. Babinski is here with us this evening, if not everyone's met. This is our new Director of Finance and Operations, and she'll have a couple of things to add relative to the new budget season that's upcoming. So, we've kind of gone through the budget monthly. I think the last time we spoke, we referenced a number of pieces that we wanted to do some reclasses on relative to some personnel. And just as a note, the town is still without a town accountant, and the town accountant is who does those reclasses for us. So those items still remain in the budget that we need to just sort of clean up. However, that won't take place until we have some additional staffing at Town Hall. So and the things that we're going to go through this evening will also fall in that same category. So I'd like to just sort of direct you to a number of things starting at around page 30. And really what this is on page 30 of your year-to-date budgets. I think you can see the page numbers in the top right-hand side. And I'm going to direct you to, it's on each of the pages, it's the maintenance lines at each of the schools. You'll recall that this year we had, not only do we have the maintenance lines that we typically have, so on page 30, I think second from the bottom, you'll see this is the Murdoch Middle High School maintenance line, and the dollar amount that's left over there is about $8,000, which is spent at 95%. You'll recall as well that this year we had a $100,000 budget line for facilities projects. The other piece that we have in our budget is an HVAC line that we have annually around $44,000. So what you'll note is that each of the school maintenance lines is further depleted than we would like. However, that's reflective of a number of items that have been misplaced, meaning some things that would be, say, a boiler issue that we would typically put under HVAC is currently resting in a building account. So again, when the town accountant comes back and returns, or we have a town accountant, and the town does have some agreement in place currently to have the former accountant show up about once a week. So we're all sort of sharing space right now, but when she returns, we will have all those reclassified so that the special projects appear in the special project line as opposed to the individual buildings. So some examples of a project might be, we had the uplighting that probably no one here has ever seen at Murdoch High School. Maybe Mr. Murphy has seen that, maybe Mr. Vine, but when those buildings were built back in the 90s, the new school, there is some nice uplighting outside. You've seen those lights around the buildings. So those foundations, as an example, had cement foundations that all eroded, so we had all those replaced and had the lights replaced and LED lights, so that now there should be some lighting on the buildings in the evening. My point there being that some of those things have ended up in the high school facilities line as opposed to the special projects line. So we're going through and making sure that those things are cleaned up. So you'll see those across each of the pages. You'll see on page 31, you have the Toy Town facilities budget, again, spent at about 82%. You'll have, I believe, at the top of page, top of page 32 has that as well. And the page 33 has the memorial budget. So we're going through and basically cleaning those up and moving them around. But we won't see those reflected until we have an accountant.
Mr. Chair,
Larry?
I did see on page 31 that we've spent 96.2% on rubbish of the budget that we had for rubbish.
Correct.
We have $745 left. They're going to get us through to June?
No, so we encumber that at
Gonna
the
have to-
beginning. We encumber the rubbish. We know what that dollar amount is going to be at the beginning of the year, so that's actually encumbered, and we just charge against that open PO as the year goes. So even though it reflects that it's all been spent, the majority of that is actually encumbered, so that's actually taken care of.
Okay.
The other piece I think that you should note on that same page is around our oil expense. You can see at the very top of page 31 that Mr. Murphy just brought us to. We have spent $0 at this point of our heating fuel, and I just want to sort of reiterate that we did bring that budget up this year expecting heating fuel increases in terms of costs. Last year when we were working on the budget, that cost was somewhere, heating fuel was around $5 a gallon. We are currently locked in at $2.90 a gallon, so we were very fortunate in that. And to date, we have not had to have those tanks filled yet again. So right now, we're in a really good place around heating fuel for all of our buildings. And we're fortunate to have that rate locked in at $2.90. The only other item I just wanted to bring you to was the Toy Town the electric line. So the Toy Town electric line, and I'm looking for the page that is on.
31.
31. The Toy Town electric line is spent at a rate higher than we would typically like, and when you compare that to those at the high school and Memorial, it's already spent at a higher rate than the other two buildings, which is interesting in that Memorial, as an example, has central air conditioning and heat, which we don't have air conditioning at Toy Town. So it is something that we're investigating as to why, having gone through the bills, why that is spent at a higher rate than the other buildings are currently. And I think that Ms. Babinski has a little bit of an explanation she would like to provide this evening as well relative to that.
Sure. So if you see your own electric bills, you'll have seen that rates have increased. In particular with Toy Town, the difference between Toy Town and Memorial and Murdoch Middle High School is the size. So Toy Town is not utilizing more than 100 kilowatts. So your rate is slightly different than the bigger buildings, which are using more kilowatt hours for energy. The other difference is that the more energy that you use, the more energy that you create also, so your credits are not as high. So one of the things that we were talking about is looking at your solar credits. I believe the solar credits are coming in and being allocated evenly amongst the 3 schools, so whether or not that makes sense to do that or do a larger credit to Toy Town versus the other schools, we're going to kind of investigate that a little bit further and bring that back to you.
Mr. Chair,
Larry?
You just brought up a good point. Are we going to get any of that solar money that?
It's a little early, Mr. Murphy, but
I know.
actually, the town manager and I spoke on that today. And we do have something in place that we would like to bring forward, probably at the tri-board, and I would bring that forward. There's a tri-board meeting sort of coming up, and something that we'll probably bring forward at the next school committee meeting as well to discuss what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If there's no other questions in the actual line item budget, I have, Ms. Babinski will have another update relative to the budget going forward.
Just a very general question for either of you. The salary percentages should be, I think, around 50% if everything was equal and we were working in a vacuum, but we can see that some are at 40%, some are at 60%, some are at 30, closer to 30%. That probably is specific to the position and the category of work, but any general comments about how they're a little varied?
I don't mind answering that one. So some of the contracted employees would be actually compensated from July 1st through December, so they would be roughly at 50%, whereas your instructional salaries really start in September, so they're only a quarter of the percentage through the salary line, as well as obviously the position and whatnot. I don't know if you have anything to add to that. But.
No, so you raise a good point. So specifically, if you look at the grade level teachers, paraprofessionals, we discussed paraprofessionals at the last time. We should be at a roughly 30% for grade level and paras, and then the others should be higher that are contractual that do year round. So for the most part, they're right on. The paras are a little off right now, but that's something that we have the reclasses in for.
So then the other update was regarding the governor's budget. So this year we're expecting our Chapter 70 formula spreadsheet and municipal contribution estimates to come out the second week of March, which is very late. Typically we get those the second or third week of January. So DESE did hold a conference last week to kind of run through some of the rates with us. The state will be realizing another 1/6 of the Student Opportunity Act this year. We have gone through the exercise to kind of do a very, very rough estimate for Winchendon, and the caveat to that is that we do not have any municipal contribution rates as far as what our income ratios are going to be and how they calculate your Chapter 70, which is your requirement of your percentage for the town to contribute. So basically, the state has a formula that they determine what your foundation budget is, and that's what they believe that the district should spend on education. Obviously, that includes net school spending, which is what you're required to spend on education as a municipality. And then they determine how much of that the town can contribute. And then Chapter 70 makes up the difference. And so we are looking at our foundation budget increasing significantly again for next year. I believe you realized about 10% on your foundation budget this current year, and it's going to be very close to that for next year as well. Again, the purpose of the Student Opportunity Act is to really help districts provide the resources to your needier students, economically disadvantaged, special education, English language learners, younger students, and the formula does address that. So we are expecting an increase in Chapter 70 as well as an increase in the foundation budget. So more to come on that, but it will obviously delay municipal budgets and school district budgets while we wait for the governor's budget to come out.
Ms. Babinski, is the delay in the cherry sheets and budgets the result of the change of the executive administration? Is it
Yes.
waiting for the new governor to come in?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And so how do we have those preliminary numbers now? Is that the result of the DESI call?
Yes, yes. So what they did was give us the anticipated rates for your foundation budget. So the one thing that we can sort of look at with relative confidence is what we believe the foundation budget will be. What we don't feel confident about is what your municipal contribution will be. So we are using rates based on last year's cherry sheets and the Chapter 70 formula, which we know will obviously change depending on the town's income growth. So that's the piece that we won't really know confidently until closer to March.
Questions for the superintendent or Ms. Babinski?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, good.
Just real briefly, in light of what you're saying about the state numbers coming in, one of the things that I'm hoping that we can avoid this year that we've had trouble with in the past is getting a budget, even a draft budget, to consider earlier than we have in the past, because we've been in a situation, the committee's been in a situation before where it's been, the months between January and May have gone by really quickly, and we have found ourselves in a situation of having to look at and digest the budget over a pretty short period of time. And I'm hoping that we can avoid that this year. And I'm just wondering if, not to put you on the spot, but if you have any idea when we might see an initial draft budget from you, whether it be late January, early February.
I'll defer.
Okay. Excuse me. So the good news is your contracts are all negotiated. So your obligations, we can certainly put obligations and whatnot together for the draft budget. With the anticipated revenue for the foundation budget, certainly the team would have to look at what initiatives and, goals, vision the committee has in order for some of that additional funding. The areas, challenges that you have, again, with the caveat that the funds are supposed to be utilized for those needier populations. So how do you allocate more resources in those areas? So it's kind of twofold. We could certainly have, obligations a little more quickly, but, there's a few bids, I believe, that have to go out as far as, some of your oil and I don't know where the town's at with their electric rate negotiations, things like that, so we can look at that. But most of the obligations could be done early and then kind of look at that closer to March. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so probably around 80% would be my guess. 80% of our budget is salaries and whatnot, right? So we already know what those expenses are.
Correct.
You know, some of the other things, like utilities and whatnot, that's a crapshoot. None of us know for our homes or for businesses and schools and so on. But we should be able to get some kind of, I'm anticipating that we should get some kind of a feel from the state as to what we're going to get for Chapter 70 funds. So, Greg, I'm confident that we should be able to put together a budget that might have to be adjusted a little bit, but we should be able to move forward on our timeline and complete a budget, and then maybe, who knows with what the future holds, but if everything stays relatively the same, then we can count on the monies that are allotted for next year. And we should be able to present a budget at town meeting in May that is, 98 or 95% accurate.
Mr.
Because
Chair.
most of the stuff is known.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this isn't just for schools. This is for every municipality, city, town. So it isn't like we are the only ones that are not going to know. So this is whether you're a school committee or a city, town. So the town's going to be in the same boat as we are.
That's correct.
So it may be a situation where, yes, we absolutely, I think that, having a draft of some sort, we might be able to do that, and we may have to adjust numbers accordingly. But I think that having worked through the last transition of a new governor, new administration coming in for the state, that yes, it's hard, but it really, once you get the numbers, you're all set. But it is something that I think we can do, like Larry said, pretty quickly once we get them. But the town isn't going to be giving us a hard time. And if anything, I think, if we have to push back, it won't just be us that has to push timelines back. It'd be the town as a whole. So I'm not very anxious about this at all.
I think if I may, I think to answer Mr. Vine more directly, I think we can have something earlier, and I think to Mr. Murphy's point, in the prior years, last year, every single contract was more or less open as we were beginning our budget, and that made things very difficult to sort of get that 80%, and you're correct, it's generally 80%. If I'm not mistaken, last year it was 78%. So, we can get those numbers. Those numbers are easy. We could get those pretty quickly. And like you say, that consumes about 80% of the budget. It's that remaining 20% of what we're doing, what flexibility that gives us from an operating perspective. But we should be able to get things earlier, seeing as how we have things sewn up relative to contracts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Mr. Chair, can I just make one request going forward? Even though we're not technically live streaming tonight, but going forward, for those, just for the audience at home, even though we don't normally have a crowd this large, can we start putting these things on the screen? I know that you do when we do the presentation that's coming up, but if we're talking about budget-specific things, it'd be great if the people that are here could see what we're talking about too. So maybe going forward, we could think about that so they don't just think we're pulling numbers out of air.
We can definitely present that.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to our subcommittee reports. Before we report on the policy subcommittee, any updates from other subcommittees that we want to give? Greg, Karen, or Larry, or Alicia?
None tonight.
Nothing here.
None tonight.
Okay. Only update is that the policy subcommittee will be scheduling meetings in the coming weeks for the purpose of doing the annual policy review and update That will take place in the near future. We do not have a date yet, but of course, that will be announced as any open meeting is. It is an open meeting as a subcommittee meeting, and so we do have the obligation to make that known, and we will in the near future. Any questions or comments on subcommittees? All right, that brings us to new business. The first topic on our agenda for new business is the Early Childhood Literacy Center and Schools Reorganization Proposal. This is a proposal that is coming to us from the administration for our digestion tonight, and so we'll turn it over to the superintendent, please.
Great, thank you. I'd ask our leadership team if they'd like to come forward and have a seat up front, and so the way, or in any of these chairs. So the way we'd sort of like to handle this evening, if you don't mind, is we will go through and make the presentation, and I've asked the leadership team to step up, and they're free to chime in on areas that I might miss, or some points that they would like to raise as well as we make presentations. We're looking to hold questions to the end if we can, as we have things sort of dispersed through the presentation that I'm hoping answers many of the questions and comments and concerns that were raised this evening, but through public comment. So I do hope to address a number of those things, if not directly, at least indirectly. So with that, we are proposing this evening an early childhood literacy center slash sort of a school reorganization proposal for the Winchendon Public Schools here this evening. So there's a number of topics we would like to go through this evening. First off, what does that look like in terms of the Winchendon Public Schools reorganization? Sort of what are we talking about? And you can see here through the agenda the number of items that we have. So the Early Childhood Learning Center, both pros and challenges, and the same thing for both the elementary 1 through 4 and grades 5 at Murdoch Middle School, pros and challenges for each. We have some district-wide pros that we would like to cover, some facilities / operational challenges, a couple of important points and what the next steps might be, and then we certainly would love to hear questions. So this is the proposed reorganization in terms of what we are proposing in terms of the organization of schools. And so I just wanted to point out here a couple of different things. So first off, we'll just kind of go through. We're proposing an early childhood literacy center that would be housed at the current Toy Town Elementary School. That would be pre-K and kindergarten. We are proposing an elementary housed at the current Memorial School that would be grades 1 through 4. We are also proposing to move grade 5 to Murdoch Middle School, so that Murdoch Middle School would now contain grades 5 through 8. And then, of course, the high school would remain as grades 9 through 12. So a couple of points before we sort of get into some of this in a deeper way, before we move into some of the pros and cons. I want to be really clear that with this is not about, what's driving this is 100% a focus on our students. This is focused on our most basic learners, those pre-K and K learners, and their particular needs. This is not about space constraints and that we need more room in one place or another. It's not about finances and that we need to reduce costs or any of those types of things. And those are variables that often drive this type of work, is that we're looking at finances or space. And tonight, this is not about finances or space. This is what we believe as a team is best for our students in Winchendon. And I'd like to sort of specify some of those things and the challenges that we face. We began last year's budget with a focus on the elementary. If you recall, we added a couple of teachers to the elementary schools, we added specialists to the elementary schools, and we really wanted to shore that up as a long-term solution to what we do here in Winchendon. Those are that's our foundation of what we do. And really, this is the second step in that this is purely a focus on our most critical age group, where actual learning begins. And right now, the pre-K and the K share the attention of an entire building. The behaviors, the administration, the teachers, et cetera, across 4 different grades. So the proposal here is to focus and create really a premier early childhood learning center at the Toy Town School and focus on that most critical age group. I think there were some folks that mentioned gaps caused by the pandemic and a focus on education. And those of us that have been in education for a long time recognize one of the most difficult things in education to capture and get our arms around, which is the direct relationship or indirect relationship relative to poverty and academic achievement. And in this town, since pre-pandemic to current day, our poverty rate has increased by 15% in the schools. So pre-pandemic, our impoverished, whatever the kind of categories that DESE puts on that, we sat at about 40.9% of our district was considered impoverished. Today, we sit at 55.5%. Last year, we sat at 59%. And the reason this is so important is there's a tremendous amount of literature on what we call the income achievement gap. And what's really clear is that the single best predictor of academic achievement is poverty rates. And it's not just a predictor for how we're going to do in kindergarten and pre-K and so on. It's a long-term predictor. It's both a short and long-term predictor about long-term success of our students. And so that's really what's driving this, is that we would like to put a pure focus on those students. And I'll just give you a simple statistic that most of us can at least relate to instead of take out the edge-of-speak that we often talk about. So one of those things about achievement, and a simple one that we can look at is students sort of defined in impoverished communities, 46% of 3 to 6 year olds can write their name in a community. So we can actually delineate this, 46%. However, those who are not impoverished, 64% can. It's a 20% differential. And I know that's a very simple statistic. There's all sorts of things around phonics, word awareness, word recognition, lots of other things that we could get into. However, that's a really simple that we all can relate to. It's a 20% difference in the number of students that can simply write their name as they enter kindergarten. And so what we're here proposing is that we want to prepare our students, the most critical students, to be ready for kindergarten and first grade as they go forward. So that's just at the root of what we are doing and what we are proposing tonight. The other questions that come up, very specific, are why would we house this at why would we house the Early Childhood Literacy Center at Toy Town as opposed to Memorial? I've heard that repeatedly, and I just want to address that really quite directly. Memorial School would house 4 specific grades, and Toy Town would house 2 grades as we know it, as we're proposing. The square footage differential between those 2 schools is approximately 20,000 square feet, with the difference leaning towards Memorial. So Memorial School has, if you kind of take out some common space that they both share, Memorial School has 20,000 additional square feet. So it's much better positioned in terms of a space capacity to house those 4 grade levels as opposed to the Toy Town Elementary. If you just reduce it to classroom space, literally absolute classroom space where teachers currently occupy, there's 7,000 additional square feet in the actual classrooms that are being used between Memorial and Toy Town. Again, for Memorial having the greatest number, a 7,000 square foot increase. So at the very root of it, that's a driving factor in terms of it's better capable to house those students. Additionally, it puts our grades 1 through 12 on a single campus, which opens up a lot of flexibility with the middle school and high school, and opportunities for internships, opportunities for students from the high schools and whatnot to come down and support at that lower elementary school. So those are the proposals that are sitting on the table, and I'd like to go through sort of individual pros at the Early Childhood Literacy Center, starting there. First off, the curriculum is more closely aligned as we see it between pre-K and K. Pre-K and K curricula both have an emphasis on play being a part of the learning. First grade does not. First grade is a different type of curriculum. It begins to focus much more on literacy, and grades 1 through 4 are focused on literacy. So again, where pre-K and K, we see it that curriculum is more closely aligned, and we can work more together with those 2 grades than K and 1 relate to one another. We would continue to have specialists in the buildings to provide an introduction to specials, specifically for pre-K students. So today, pre-K students don't receive any specials, and when I say that, I'm talking about our music and arts most specifically, possibly gym. We would be looking to continue to service that school for kindergarten, and we would extend that to pre-K as well. which we believe from a music and arts perspective is very important. We could certainly consider, and many districts do that, separate busing for kindergarten. Kindergarten busing, and I know Mr. Vine has experienced this a couple of years ago, it can oftentimes be a confusing factor where kindergarten students, we need to have eyesight to basically drop a student off from the bus. That can be, oftentimes a difficulty for our bus drivers anywhere, not just ours, relative to who's a kindergartner, who's a first grader, specifically if we have substitute bus drivers and that type of thing. So it certainly revolves around safety for our kindergartners and busing. We would have plenty of para support and for coverage across those two grade levels in the Early Childhood Literacy Center. We would have, and this addresses some concerns, a dedicated age-appropriate playgrounds at the Early Childhood Learning Center. So part of our ESSER grant, we had proposed, I believe off the top of my head, it's somewhere around $300,000 in our ESSER grant to put forward a age-specific playground for pre-K and K, of course. So that would be established at the current Toy Town setting. There's a lot of talk this evening about fencing and those types of things. All that would be included. So again, approximately $300,000 that we have in our ESSER grant dedicated for that and has been approved. We would just have to go out to bid. We would most immediately probably develop a transitional pre-K/K classroom. We hear every year about pre-K students who just really aren't quite ready for kindergarten, but quite frankly, we don't have an option. They kind of have to go to kindergarten. And so usually what that revolves around is they're just not quite prepared for a full-day experience. There's a maturity perspective. There's all those types of things that, regardless of the pandemic, we know about students. We've had maybe some of our own children that they're age appropriate, but they just weren't sort of emotionally appropriate. I know what happened in my house. And so we would be able to create a transitional classroom for that pre-K to K piece, quite possibly a full-day program to help them transition into kindergarten the following year. Again, it's something that comes up each and every year in our schools. We would include our CFC playgroups. It's something that we don't talk a lot about in here, but we do have playgroups through our CFCE, and I don't, off the top of my head, I cannot recite to you what CFCE stands for. I know someone in the crowd can, but we would include the CFCE in the Early Childhood Learning Center, and those playgroups would be integrated into this particular capacity. We would obviously have early literacy specific professional development, where once again, our pre-K currently sort of just participates in the professional development that the rest of our teachers receive at the Memorial School. I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, I'm just saying that that's probably not the best approach, that they should receive really grade level specific professional development. What they do is very different and specific than what grades 1 through 4 and higher grades do. So we would be able to arrange that type of professional development specifically for our most critical learners. And lastly, because I know it's a point that, like if I'm a classroom teacher, this would be important to me. All the Memorial teachers have central air conditioning, quite frankly. I would not want to move. We have another grant that has been approved for AC in the student classrooms at Toy Town Elementary. So there was a grant that came out earlier this year that we applied for and we have received. We, of course, have to go through a preliminary step of sort of a study, which we're working on now. And once that's passed, we would be able to move forward in the grant and install basically mini-split systems in the classrooms at Toy Town Elementary where our students would be housed. So we would need to go out to, so again, that would be approved and we would be moving forward with the bid process here as quickly as possible. Long-term, we would be looking to expand our Early Childhood Literacy Center over the next 2 to 3 years. So thinking about full-day pre-K programs, which we don't currently offer, which I believe would really be a step in the right direction for our community, so that we can get our students up and ready for kindergarten and first grade, and expand the programs that would really have a more robust offerings and options for our families in Winchendon. Anyone? Things to add? No.
Slide.
Early Childhood Literacy Center challenges, ensuring that kindergarten, receives PD that's also aligned with the upper grades. So we are, as we are at every transition, concerned with that vertical alignment. We recognize that as a challenge and that we would want to make sure that our kindergarten teachers are aligned with and getting our kindergarten students ready for grade 1 as well. So sort of straddling that fence a little bit. And then as a part of that is establishing strong communications between the Early Childhood Literacy Center and the Rising School, currently at Memorial, for those rising students. That's what we see as the largest hurdles at the Early Childhood Literacy Center. I know there will be questions around restrooms. We will cover that in the facilities challenges. The elementary 1 through 4 pros. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we again believe that the curriculum is much more closely aligned 1 through 4, as it's a true focus on literacy, and the play component slowly sort of diminishes. So that would allow us to, again, have a more focused professional development program at that particular school. It certainly encourages a very strong vertical alignment across our math and ELA programs, and it would also allow for real scheduling flexibility in terms of the number of folks that we have. So again, thinking about our allied artists, it would allow us to continue bringing our allied artists in. We'll have a few more allied artists at that 1 to 4 that would allow and sort of encourage a common planning time, which is where we are able to work together as teams to prepare lessons and whatnot, units of study and so on for both math and ELA. In terms of the challenges, not shying away from this, we're talking about staff from 2 different buildings, and that's a challenge regardless of where you are and how close you are and all those types of things. We're talking about, or we're proposing combining staff that currently are in 2 different schools, which have 2 different cultures and have different routines and what they do. Yes, I know that I have scheduling up here again, and I just had it on the prior slide, but not only do we have, as I mentioned prior, we have some flexibility, but in that becomes a challenge as well in how you schedule that flexibility. It's sort of a pro and a con, that it's just more variables that you need to work out. It also is a con where the scheduling, we have schools that have 2 different types of currently and of schedules, and those types of things would need to be accommodated. Some grade 5 at the Murdoch Middle School pros, and I recognize, and we'll get to the challenges in a second, but again, this is about what's best, we believe is what's best for students. And so as we talked about literacy as a focus in grades 1 through 4, that's a real distinct shift in the curriculum at grade 5. Grade 5 becomes very specific and moves away from literacy and into content. It's delineated in the curriculum very clearly that it's less about those types of things and very specific about content that actually aligns with the way that the Department of Education also likes to provide licenses. They're very content specific beginning at grade 5. There is an overlap from elementary that goes into grade 5, which is what we call a generalist license. However, DESE has been slowly moving away from that for the past 8 to 10 years. So this would more closely align with both the curriculum and the way that we license our teachers, providing some additional flexibility possibly. Access to middle school opportunities for grade 5 students, whether that's extracurriculars, bless you, extracurriculars of any sort, whether that's the arts, plays, etc., or athletics, whatever those types of things might be, would give access to those students to play on middle school athletics, participate in the plays that the middle school puts on. Any of those types of things would be currently available. The potential of looping possibilities with grade 6. So I'm not sure if you're overly familiar with how things work at Murdoch Middle School. There is a grade 6 team, which is distinctly different from the grade 7-8 team. The way it operates is very different. So this would kind of now create a grade 5-6 team. So again, providing some flexibility amongst our teaching staff and the possibility for looping, which means to stay with your children in grade 5, the same children with grade 5 to 6. We'll get to some of those other pieces on the challenges here in just a second. Smoother grade level transitions going through the middle school. There's the least amount of changes / transitions for staff joining the middle school. So what that means is, and I would let Jess, if she wants to chime in, no new initiatives for the faculty that would be grade 5 moving to the middle school, not using the Summit platform, nor is it planned. and they would continue to have the same teaming structure. So currently at Toytown Elementary, they have a teaming structure. They have math teachers and English teachers. That's currently in place, obviously, at the middle school, and so they would move right into that same type of structure that they currently have. Did you have anything to add to that, Jess, if I didn't explain it properly? Okay. So currently, the way it works at the middle school is they get a somewhat of a exposure to the Summit platform and then move into that more fully in grades 7 and 8. I believe that's accurate. And so there would not be a plan to have grade 5 begin with that. They would continue what they currently do. Grade 6 would continue what they do in 7 and 8 and so on. Challenges. I just kind of wrapped this up in one piece here in the first bullet. In the same physical building as high school. And I recognize from a parent perspective, as a parent myself, of both a daughter and a son, I know that when my daughter moved to a middle school as a 5th grader, which, just as an aside, is the very typical arrangement across the state, is that 5th grade is a part of middle school, I had my own concerns. On being on the buses with, same thing, they shared buses with the high school and so on, and those are concerns for all of us. In terms of safety within the building, I would like to address first. The way that grade 6 currently works, and this would be the same with grade 5, is that grade 6 is never left alone, I guess is the easiest way to say it. They are escorted from class to class, each and every class period. Grade 7, I think, they release a little responsibility, and grade 8 gets to walk by themselves sometimes. Is that correct, Jess? Yes.
Sometimes.
Yes, sometimes grade 8 gets to walk by themselves. So grade 5 would have a similar experience to grade 6, which is they are escorted from place to place. They would have their own set of bathrooms, much like grade 6, I believe, does currently in the middle school. Grade 5 would have a set of bathrooms that are exclusively, grade 5. Most specifically, I believe those would be the ones, as we kind of thought about it, quite possibly the ones right outside from the office. So in terms of that, we've had to put those safeties, if you will, into the grade 6. That would extend to grade 5 and keeping them as close as possible on that first floor, kind of down near the middle school office, and sort of, keeping them safe, keeping them present, keeping them visible while the staff are with them at all times. If you're not familiar with how the high school works, although it's shares one building, that really separated across the spaces. They don't share the gym. There's a divider in the gym during the day. We do share the cafeteria as well. However, in the cafeteria, we have very separate lunches and those types of things. So there would be a plan in place to make sure that the 5th graders are kept physically separate from those high school students. As it relates to busing, I do hear the concerns about, a 10-year-old or whatever happens to be grade level on the bus with our current juniors and seniors. I would say at this point, less than 50% of our juniors and seniors actually ride a bus, probably even fewer of our seniors. Most seniors have no interest in being on the bus, quite frankly. And those that don't have cars often get rides from their friends. So we have the predominant amount of high school students on the bus are freshmen and sophomores. In terms of the grade levels, in terms of the ages, I guess I would say, the 10-year-old versus the 9-year-old on the bus, I understand it's a concern. It's a typical concern for parents across the Commonwealth, quite frankly, especially in smaller districts. I'm not sure that 1 year is a significant difference in terms of whether or not my 6th grader who's 11 is on the bus versus my 5th grader who might be 10 or whatever those particular ages are. Currently, the way we work the buses at the middle school and high school, middle school students are required to sit in the front of the bus. High school students, I guess it's a hierarchical thing. The older you get, the further you get to move back. And we go through that with our bus drivers each year. We ask them to maintain that and keep our youngest students in the front and near to them where they can see them at all times. If we had to go down that road, we could certainly look at busing and separate busing, quite possibly for a different grade level if that continues to rise. It is certainly something that we can pursue with our bus company and ask for estimates along those lines. Recess, grade 6, I believe, has some structure for going outside each day. Grade 5 would have something similar, and to be honest, I'm gonna ask Jess to sort of address what she's talking about for recess because I'm not 100% clear.
So sixth grade right now, it depends on what the teachers would like to do for recess time. We don't have anything that's currently built in. That's because of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, sixth grade had recess every day. That's something that we'd like to bring back because we know that that's something that's needed for our students. So we've had structured recess where we can use the fields across the softball fields. We have kickball, football. We have area where students can do art, like chalk, sidewalk chalk on our walkways. So there are different structured activities. We know students do best with structure. They have a hard time with transitions and need that, that ability to still play, but in a structured way. So we've had different ideas. We've also been looking into some grants and ideas for having some sort of a middle school playground. Ms. Politsky and I have been looking into this for a little while now and have some ideas of what that could look like.
Thank you. I can state that as a former middle school principal for many years, grade 5 recess is an ongoing area of debate. Some schools do it, some schools don't. The schools that don't are asked to do it. The schools that do stop doing it. It's a year in, year out sort of contest, if you will, about what's appropriate, what works, what doesn't for grade 5. And I will simply just say it's not something that Winchton is going to solve, as I am well aware that many districts face that very same thing. Some folks really strongly believe that 5th grade should have a recess. Others strongly believe that they should be in classes just like the older kids. They've now moved to the middle school. Here we go. We're going to try to split the middle a little bit and have a structured recess and provide that space would be the plan. Would it look the same as quite possibly in elementary school? I am comfortable saying that not likely, but there would be something.
And I just want to mention one thing that Mr. King had said about our students being escorted. I think I've said this several times about our 6th graders. I like to think of the middle school as actually 2 separate schools within a school. A lot of times our 6th graders, and I would say also 5th graders, since I have a current 5th grader and an 8th grader, we are saying that they're not elementary kiddos, but they're not middle school kiddos yet. They're not really sure what they are. So we are really trying to prepare them to be middle schoolers in 7th and 8th grade. So a lot of times that 10, 11, 12 age range, they're not littles, but they're not middles. So that's something that we've tried to work really hard in making that. That's a very difficult transition right there. Make it a little bit easier for the students in 6th grade. So 5th grade would be considered the same way. It's a school within a school.
Thank you. Some district-wide pros. We believe that there will be fewer impactful transitions, and I would like to just sort of define that a little bit. One of the ongoing conversations in schools always pertains to transitions between schools. We don't often think of a student moving from pre-K into kindergarten as an official transition. It's just not something we generally think about. And so when we think about establishing an early childhood learning center, we don't think of that as creating a transition to go to your elementary school. When we start talking about traditional transitions, we're talking about going from grade 2 to grade 3 that happens to be housed in another school and so on. So the way we currently see it is that we're going to be reducing the transitions by 1. So you're a student in the Winchton Public Schools, you would be at the 1 to 4 school, currently housed at the Memorial Building, and then make 1 transition to the middle school building where you would stay for the remainder of your academic career. The reason we bring that up is there is, again, a tremendous amount of literature about the impact of transitions on students. Most significantly, transitions that are not necessary, meaning, let's just say you move across the country, you move towns, et cetera, but in grade 7, and you start grade 8 in a new school. That's an unnatural transition, and there's a tremendous amount of literature that talks about how negative that is, the negative outcomes on student learning. So our attempt here is as well to reduce meaningful transitions, and we believe we have that here. The other piece that we believe is a real pro is having grades 1 through 12 on one campus. even in terms of some grants that we're looking at currently with the town, relative to access to schools, we was applied for today, signage, those types of things. Having one campus for your schools was a benefit where you get to spend sort of more funds towards that one campus location. Again, it also gives us ability to have high school interns, much more easily have access to that Memorial campus, whereas currently we experience some difficulties, especially with those without cars, students that is getting over to Toy Town to provide some of that intern access. And we've actually expanded some of that work over the past couple of years in a meaningful way. We also get some special education programming flexibility in terms of the way this would work. And again, as mentioned earlier, we align much more closely with the way Department of Education certifications are currently moving toward and exist today, thereby providing some staffing flexibility. So one of the things we would be doing is certainly creating a very large spreadsheet with all of the certifications and those types of things to sort of look at appropriate placements way down the road here a little bit, but trying to take advantage of folks' certifications and the flexibility that we provide within our school environments. Again, thinking about literacy versus content. Facilities/operations challenges. Let's not hide from it. The planning and coordination of this will be very important. We're proposing this to start in the fall. There's a lot of planning and coordination that would need to happen as quickly as possible. We would want to get our bid processes going as quickly as possible relative to the playgrounds, relative to the HVAC and so on. We recognize classroom moves. We currently have teachers oftentimes are packing up their classrooms at the end of the year. We've got a little experience with this from COVID, but we would be contracting with some types of movers. We want to keep our flexibility for our custodians and our facilities folks over the course of the summer. So one way we could do that is to hire movers to actually make the physical move of the materials as opposed to relying on our custodians and or facilities. We would also have technology moves, most specifically phones and quite possibly projectors. We run a network-based phone system, if you're familiar, TCP/IP, or an IP phone system. So an individual is sort of tied to their phone. If they take their phone with them, and you call their number, it still rings them. So there's some work there in the background on the technology perspective that we would need to plan. And clearly, we would like, what we're proposing here is we would like to really create a premier early learning literacy center. We would like to be, in my mind, a premier facility for this region. None of these exist in our region. We would like to be a facility that other folks look towards. Years 2 and 3, we would envision folks from other communities wanting to, quote unquote, school choice in, although that's not a thing at pre-K. We would be looking to possibly tuition folks into our early literacy center if that's a possibility. We will have the space to expand, and we would like to pursue that. And we would like to create a center that folks would like to come to. Early literacy center restrooms. This has been an area of much debate. I asked Mr. Johnson, Martin, most of you know him affectionately as Martin, to go around and measure the height of every toilet in both Memorial and, don't laugh, it's true, in both Memorial and Toy Town. And some of you might be very surprised to find they all measure at 16.5 inches. There are no lower bathrooms, there's no lower toilets, they're the same. I know that Toy Town was built as a high school. I've asked him to do it twice because I myself did not believe him, but lo and behold, he has documented proof that those commodes, those toilets are at the same height across our buildings. And when you think about it from a facilities perspective, it sort of makes sense. To do special plumbing in particular buildings is a huge cost expense even in building when they're non-typical. Those are currently at a standard height that you see in the homes as well. It's about 16.5 inches. We recognize there might need to be some work around sinks, specifically in classrooms for pre-K. I know there's been talk about, they do a lot of painting and those types of things and having immediate access to restrooms, to sinks that we would certainly accommodate. We also have private restrooms at the Toy Town building, a number of those private restrooms where we could accommodate changing centers and those types of things as well. So certainly things that are on our radar, and the biggest concern has historically been the height of the toilets, and they are a standard height. You'll note that there's oftentimes in these centers stools for sinks. We have that at our Head Start program, have created a situation so they can step up to the sinks just like we do in our homes each and every day when we have young children. And if necessary, those are the types of things we would pursue here as well. We've got plenty of time to address that. And then, of course, the other operational challenges is busing changes. We recognize busing changes. It was raised this evening. The parent pickup lines. Certainly, we are well aware of parent pickup lines. At the Memorial Building, it would be the same number of grades at that school. So it's not a change in the number of grades. It's currently pre-K to 2, so you have 4 grades. We would now be proposing 1 through 4, which is 4 grades. If we look at that from this year to next, we currently have approximately 398 students at Memorial. Next year, it would be 415. So if we think about that in terms of pickup, we're actually eliminating the some of the pre-K, which really is always pickup, would be moved out of that building, and with the possibility of some older students in that school, grade 4s. I don't know how many grade 4 students are walkers or bike riders, but we've seen an increase as well, and would expect to see that. So, we would like to think that it's neutral, but we would do some more work on that parent pickup line. But overall, the number of students is not changing, not significantly. Those are the facilities operational changes, or challenges, I should say. I'm looking at my list here of things that were raised. And a couple of really important points, especially for staff. First off, no staff reductions across bargaining units. We are not proposing to eliminate, do staff reductions or anything else. We believe in the faculty that we have and that they do a fantastic job. We are just proposing that we can do a better job if we focus more, in a more discriminating way on our populations. So we believe we need our staff, and we look to them to continue to do the great job that they do, where we can become more focused on our critical age groups. Nominal operational budget impact, so we just heard a little bit about what next year's budget might look like. Again, since there's no reductions in staff, we wouldn't see a huge impact on that 80% chunk that really makes up your budget. From an operational perspective, that balance of 20%, there was a comment this evening, you're correct, we would still be running that school. This is not about a cost savings necessarily, those types of things. This is about doing a better job for our kids. So we don't expect to see a major savings necessarily in the physical plants, if you will. And it's not something that we're anticipating. However, there's a cost of the move. We did move during COVID. We pulled those pieces today using our professional movers. I think it was a touch under $7,000, bless you, for the actual physical move during COVID. We have funds that would not necessarily need to be used during our operating budget, our Chapter 70. We still have, we've mentioned in the last 2 years' budget presentations that we do have school choice funds in a fairly significant amount that, if necessary, those are the types of funds that we would tap into to expedite this move. Next steps, if approved, and again, so this is really about joint governance. We're here tonight to ask for support for this proposal. There's nothing legislatively that requires a vote to approve this, but obviously it's good practice, and it's about how we as a group are running the schools. If approved, we would certainly be going to staff meetings. I specifically, and others that would need to participate in staff meetings to discuss these things in more detail and start hashing out details. We are not here tonight to get deep into details or the weeds, as we like to say, because we would like to create steering committees, one for each building, where we would have obviously staff, parents, community members. We would have representation from the union on each of those steering committees, so that we get the voices of everyone to move forward with the details of how this would sort of roll out. We would certainly talk then about having orientations and open houses at the varying schools for both parents and students. I know specifically we generally have step-up days at the middle school and a bit at Toy Town as well. We would separate those step-up days out specifically for the incoming 5th graders and 6th graders, so they would have their own days. Those types of things are sort of how we're looking ahead. But we would start with staff meetings and steering committees immediately. And now we're open for questions.
Mr. Superintendent, thank you for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
questions, comments, thoughts, reactions from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Fine.
I have to say that when I first heard about this, that my initial reaction was positive, and I feel better after your presentation tonight, and I thank you and your staff for putting this together for us. It looks like you've considered just about everything that can be considered in making this transition. I understand the concerns, a lot of them, I can remember some of them being raised when we moved the sixth graders up to the middle school. And some of the concerns raised here tonight sounded very similar to that. Logistics are always a problem. Change is always hard. And, you know, some folks adapt to it better than others. I mean, I'm willing to certainly still hear arguments one direction or another, but again, I want to thank you, and my initial reaction to this is very positive. I think it's crucial that we narrow that learning gap between those children who live below and above the poverty level. It's quite frankly not fair that children in poor families start off at a disadvantage, and I think we need to do everything we can to put them on a par with families that are a bit more affluent. And I'll leave it at there and hand it over to the rest of the committee for their comments. I don't have any questions at this point.
Thank you.
Greg? No other comments?
You don't have any?
Alicia, do you have any comments on the phone?
No, I think Ed really laid it out pretty clearly, and I don't have any questions on my end. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So, you know, when I received this in an email, I was pleased to see that there's been some really guided thought in how to address our students' needs, especially those impoverished students that might be a little bit behind when they start out in their academic careers. We're a very unique community. We have a lot of pluses here in our community. Those of you that don't know me, I grew up here. I graduated from Murdoch High School. I taught here for 15 years. I was an administrator here for a couple of years before I left. So, and I'm back. I've been back since 1997. It's just a great community in a lot of ways. Economically, not so great. So, addressing the needs of our students by reorganization, I think is, on paper anyway, it looks to me like a good approach. However, I would say that this has been a lot to digest tonight, probably for the audience and the people watching. I know I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I think it's very detailed, as you said, Mr. Chair. And Greg, you know, that they've covered a lot of bases. But I think I would like, I've kind of changed my mind a little bit. I would like us not to put the cart before the horse and maybe do those steering committee kinds of work, presentations to the staff and open house, some open houses in January so that people can come to the schools, maybe get a tour of the school and get a presentation similar to this and be able to bring up their concerns and whatnot. And then, so I'm not ready for a vote tonight. I think it was on the agenda for a vote, but I don't think I'm ready for one. But I would still, I'm not going to make the motion this second. I'll wait and see if Karen wants to make some comments. But I would like us to direct the superintendent to go forward, not vote yet, but have him do the work, do the research, hear all the concerns from the stakeholders, and then come back to us to get our blessing. I think that,
Bless you.
as I think about it now, I think that's a better approach than doing it tonight. So I applaud them for the work that they've done. I think it's academically sound, but they're certainly, you know, I gotta digest this a little bit before I can just jump in with both feet. So I would like to put, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I'd like the horse to go first. The horse is out there running by doing the research. Doing the research. Did you hear that, Jess?
I heard you.
Mr. Chair.
Go get that horse.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Karen?
So we know it's very cold outside. Larry and I are agreeing. So I think Larry said a few things that I was going to say. First of all, as much as I know that you are responsible for the day-to-day running of the school district, I do think that something of this level does require a vote of the school committee. To an extent, I'm not saying that it does, I'm saying I think. I'm not saying it does or doesn't. It's something that I think we need to research because it does involve a lot of moving parts. I do think that this was handled very poorly, and I'm sorry to say that, but you know, this was sent out in an email, and I know it's through no fault of your own as far as, you know, whether or not this packet was put on the town website, but we as a body know that that is not put on the town website. We have a website, we have multiple Facebook pages, we have multiple other ways of sending this out to the community as a whole, not just the Winchendon K-12 website or email address listserv. This should have been sent out to them too, to the parents, to the families, to the community. So I think this was handled poorly in the way that it was sent out, and that we had a parent, a community member, that if they had not posted it to Facebook, parents would not have been aware of it and could not have come and spoken tonight. That's a problem for me, especially as a communications chair committee, and I apologize for not being involved the last 3 meetings. One of them I was at the mass conference, the other 2 I was sick with COVID and a death in the family. But that's something that we'll be working on. But I think this was handled poorly. I think we need to address that, first of all, that this should have been sent out, and we should be doing this. The cart is before the horse here. This should have been taken to families. This should be, it's a nice presentation. There's no data. There is no data for why we're doing this. It's nice that you want to align the curriculum. It's nice that you want to make a beautiful early learning center. You're saying that you want to, you know, cut down on transitions. That's great. However, you're really not cutting down on transitions because there isn't a huge transition that you're cutting out here. Because right now, you have a transition from if the student goes into kindergarten or pre-K here in Winchendon and stays through 12th grade, they transition at 2nd grade into 3rd grade, and then from 5th grade into 6th grade, and stays in the building. It doesn't matter where those buildings are. So, I mean, you're not cutting out any transition, actually. You're just changing where the transition is in their makeup. Now, as a special ed advocate, I'm going to say that there are social emotional concerns here. I personally, looking at the pre-K aspect, I'd be concerned having pre-K, as much as I love early learning centers, and I do actually come from a district originally that has had them and has seen them actually get remarried into actual elementary schools because what they saw was that the children missed out on the modeling and the behavioral modeling and the social emotional pieces that they lacked because they were not with older children in the elementary piece. So I mean, there are pieces there. There are pieces that we need to think about with the 5th to 6th grade, which yes, it's a difference of a year. I understand that. However, there are all these questions. So yes, we should be doing the things like Larry said, having these community meetings. But I can't possibly say we should direct you to go forward in the sense of, let's do the work. I think we should do the work in having communication with the community, not just the parents, but the actual staff who are going to be, you're expecting to take part in this and be part of this, because you're taking it for granted that they're going to stay if you make all these moves too. And that's a big assumption to make. So I think that we all need to come together right now and think about the fact that, A, we shouldn't be voting on this. First of all, we shouldn't make a proposal and vote on it the same night, period. We should make a proposal, digest it, as Larry so greatly said, and then come back to it, give people a chance to look at it. So I would ask that going forward, we make an effort to reach out to the stakeholders before we make a proposal like this, and give me the data behind this, please, because you have a lot of great suggestions in here, and I'm not saying I'm against this at all. I come from districts where we have K through 12 schools. That's, where I came from originally, and I think they're great. And I actually like the idea. I mean, I would even make the suggestion, if we're gonna do this, let's go all out. Why don't we put all of them in the same place? Is there enough space to do that? Think about that. Let's talk to parents about that. Can we put a premier early learning center in the same campus and then have a premier campus setting? And then make it wonderful all in one space, and then maybe even have, except for the pickup. I know that would be horrendous, because I've been there. But I'm saying there are ways to do this, but I mean, maybe we can do it that way too. So let's think about this, please. But I think that I would like to work with my communications committee too on how we do this better. So my concerns are great that we didn't have enough input, and unfortunately, please never make a proposal like something this intricate right before Christmas again, or the holidays, just because I think something like this should never be before the holidays, because families can't handle it. I don't think you should have to handle it before the holidays. And neither
Thank you,
should they.
Karen.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
There's a lot there, so I bet you might want to say a few things. I'll just say a couple of quick comments and then possibly turn it over, because you've heard quite a few things here. First, I'll say that, I'll start with the good. This is a focus on literacy. This is a focus on the most vulnerable youth in a town that does not have a great deal of privilege, to have students coming to us with great reading and phonics ability as they're entering their first year of school. And for that, I am thrilled to see that we are following our strategic plan, our district-wide development plan, and focusing on literacy. That is an important component for our town, for our district, for all districts, but certainly for a district that has some disadvantaged youth. Second, I am glad to see that after all of the work is done to implement this in the right way, that the expectation now, if this were to go forward, is that there would be quite minimal impacts to our budget. The school committee has few responsibilities. One of them is the budget, and therefore we have to be able to provide a vote and feedback on the way in which the funding that comes into the district is spent on the district. And for that reason, that does not seem to be an impediment that would affect our decision-making. As far as the administration of the work, there's been some great suggestions tonight about ways to include stakeholders. You had some suggestions on one of your last slides about including stakeholders, and that is the right thing to do. My couple of concerns have already been mentioned tonight, but one of the parents asked about the pickup drop-off. I'm not sure I heard enough detail on that to make me understand that. And the thing that I'm taking away from tonight, among other things, is a phrase that says fifth graders aren't littles and they aren't middles. Thank you for that.
I love that.
For the rest. But with all of that said, where there's a lot of positive and there is a lot of carrying out of this work, I do want to recognize the fact that this presentation is the start. It is not the end. Today does not become the day that the two schools merge immediately. This is the beginning of the work, and that is why we have public meetings, open meetings. That is why we have information sharing, as Karen mentioned a moment ago. And that is why we have an implementation that will take multiple months and multiple stakeholders. So whether this moves forward or not, it will, if it does move forward, it will include some of the things that have been mentioned here tonight. Before Larry speaks, I want to give the superintendent a chance to make any comments about some of the things that you've heard tonight, if you have any.
No, I appreciate the feedback and respect all of it. We will
Bless
follow
you.
the guidance and the reason we bring these things to school committee first is to not put the cart before the horse, quite frankly, in that, this is something that's very important in terms of ourselves as a group and what's best for the district. And so we don't want to pursue this in another way without sort of the approval of this committee to say this is an appropriate thing to pursue in one way or the other, whichever way that is, whether it's tonight and saying, let's slow it down a little bit, or whether it's saying, go forward with what your plan is. So I respect what the committee's having to say, and whatever the committee decides going forward is what will be respected in this district. So I appreciate all your feedback, and we'll take it away, and we'll move forward in the appropriate manner.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Go right ahead.
I would make the motion that we direct the superintendent of schools to take the proposal that he's presented tonight and do a research, fact-based study involving all stakeholders that would be affected by the proposal, and then report back to us as to his recommendation as whether or not we should move forward or not move forward, and the reasons why.
I'll second it for discussion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair,
Greg?
I'm certainly willing to go along with that. Larry brought up some very good points, and I'm willing to go along with that motion with the understanding that Mr. King is the superintendent here. And I don't want to, there are questions that need to be answered, there are steps that need to be taken, but I'm trying to restrain myself a little here, but I don't want to see him Monday morning quarterbacked all the way through this process. A step may be missed here and there, something may not show up on Facebook here and there. We hired Mr. King to do what he thought was best for this district and to handle it in the best way that he sees fit. And we did that with him and all of our administrators here. And frankly, I trust our administrators to have the best interest of the children and the community at heart, including Mr. King. And I'd like to go forward with that. I'm willing to vote yes on the motion. But I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to say something I'll regret. So I'm willing to support the motion.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I think as part of this, I'd be willing to support the motion if as part of this, because, we heard That, you know, and I agree that we need to put the focus on the students, and I agree, you know, I mean, all the studies say that impoverished students, and what were the numbers that you gave us for post and pre-pandemic?
Pre-pandemic, we were at a poverty rate of about 40.9%, not 49, 40.9. As it stands for this particular school year, we're at 55.5, and last year we were at 59.
Okay, so, and that was one of the reasonings for putting together the Early Learning Center, which I understand.
I wouldn't say it's the sole reason, and it's not necessarily the driving
No.
reason, but it is a contributing factor that I think is very important to consider.
Right, and I understand that. And I don't know if you have, well, I think you do have this data, if I remember from the DESE website. You'll have it to some extent. I understand that idea, but I'm concerned about the fact that we need to focus on not just those students, and I know that we're not, and let me make that caveat. I understand we're not. I understand this is one proposal of many, and I want to be clear in that, but, you know, if we're saying that this is one of the main factors driving this proposal, I'd like to see that data. I'd like to see what our data is for our numbers, actually pre-K through 12th grade, for where we stand, you know, not, obviously not student by student, but just what our percentage rates are, if we can, when we come back to this. Because when we're thinking about that, we do have a lot of loss, just as every district does, post-pandemic. So as much as we want to make a premier facility that may draw people to us for a pre-K through K Early Learning Center, there's no guarantee that once we get them here for that we keep them through 12th grade, unless we make sure that we're also enhancing our 1st through 12th grade. So there's many things that are going through my head. Like Larry said, I'm kind of overwhelmed too. So there's 1,000 things going through my head, but I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see any cost estimates that you have for different things. I know you kind of threw out a few numbers, but I'd like to see those in writing, you know, what you have. And I know you're not going to have, because you're going to have bids go out, but just an estimate, because I think, you know, all of these do impact the budget. So we're going to have to think about this in money numbers too. So I think it's important for us to know those things. So I'd be willing to go along with that motion as long as we have that information included.
Karen?
Greg? Mr. Chair, just one quick question. What sort of a lead time would you need if you were going to get this going for the 23-24 school year? Was this something that you could start the planning for? Well, you'd probably need to plan further than that, but is this something that would get underway as soon as the 22-23 school year ends? Or I'm just wondering how, I don't want to drag the process out so much that it's too late to get it started for the next year if we decide to go
I
ahead
thank you for
with
that question, because I think, you know, as it stands today, many people have already questioned, can we do it before next year as it is today? There's, as you all saw, there's a lot of moving parts here. I think regardless of when we start, you know, we could have started this in September. The planning piece is still going to come down to that time as we get close to the end of the school year. We have limited time, you know, February break, spring break, and summer break to sort of exact a lot of this work. And so, you know, we're already up against it. I think the bid processes will be a big part of that, and making sure that we have time to get through the bid processes and then get that work beginning. That's specifically on the playground and the HVAC in order to get that up and running. But we're up against it, but I think, you know, if we can be efficient and when we come back from the break, we can still get this in time to if approved, if supported, that we can still get this off the ground for next year. But, you know, we need to be efficient.
Okay, because I think it's important that we get the public input and the input from the stakeholders, but I don't want to see us putting frankly, so much time and effort into that that we sweat out getting every final last opinion of everybody in town and not being able to do anything.
It's my only concern. If, you know, we wait too much longer, then we're not gonna be able to have enough time to plan it and lay it out and get it done in a productive way.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Larry?
the purpose for my motion is so that you can get started on that planning, that you can move forward, that you can put some bids out. And you always take them back. You can always say, we've decided not to go in that direction, or we've decided to wait till next year. So you can start doing all the things, or most of the things, that you wanted to get started with our blessing. I think you can still get started with those. If we decide not to go forward, then I don't think there's no harm, no foul. I think you can do some of the preliminary work, like the stakeholder meetings and things like that, and you certainly could put some things out to bid and then just pull them off if we decide not to go in that direction. So that's why I wanted to support you in moving forward, but at the same time, I wanted to leave us a little bit of wiggle room in case, in the end, we decide that maybe it's not the best approach, or maybe we want to do a different approach or something. I just don't want to, I don't want to feel rushed, and I know, you know, we've made that mistake before. We've rushed things, and although they've worked out, for the most part, they've worked out, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good, you know, with the community. So I don't want to make that mistake again. Mr. Chick, can we move the question?
Well, Mr. Chair, we need to clarify the motion then, because the motion that you made was to have him
Do the
actually
research.
do the research
Right.
and reach out to the stakeholders.
That's right.
And that, my understanding of that was that we would be working towards getting answers on whether this was feasible.
I think the motion said research and fact-based, and so.
Fact-based,
so
right.
If,
That didn't involve going forward with sending out bid proposals
they
and
can, because
everything.
then we find out how much money it's gonna cost, and that's the fact. So he can send it out, or if, I don't know if he wants to do that, I'm just saying because he's concerned about his timeline. If he feels he needs to get moving on it, then that's the fact base. And you're asking for all the facts, Karen. So we need the facts. I want him to do the research so that you have the facts.
First of all, no. That's not what I said. I said I understood that he would not be able to get me that information. I said ideas of, because I knew that he could not get me those exact numbers because he would not have bids put out. So let's be clear in what I said. I understand what you said.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's be clear in what I said, okay? I did not ask for the exact numbers because I knew he couldn't give me those
To play
exact
the tape
numbers.
again, but
But I'm just saying, I didn't expect exact numbers,
okay.
All right, if I could interrupt for just a moment.
just to say. But I mean, yes,
Ms. Cast, hold on. We're going to ask Larry to state his motion again. For clarity, the motion has already been made and seconded, so we will be voting on this motion. But for clarity, if Mr. Larry could please state his motion again.
My motion is to direct the superintendent of schools, Winchton Public Schools, to do the research and fact-based approach to his proposal by soliciting feedback from the stakeholders and from any other direction that he needs to go to provide us with the information that we need to take a vote after he makes a recommendation to us.
And I'll second it again.
So this
So
is a
if he
different
feels he
motion
needs to,
then.
and just for clarification, if Mr. King feels he needs to send some bids out, then, so he can gather that information for us, so he can tell us it's gonna cost this much or that much, or here's the high bid, here's the low bid. If he feels, I'm not saying he has to do that, I'm saying that if he feels that that's part of the fact-based information, then he can do that. So he's not, his hands are not tied, so he's not falling behind on a timeline, but he can then come back to us and say, here's what I found out. I went to 3 companies and they said the move's gonna cost, I don't know, $10,000. That was the low bid. I don't see it, have a problem with that. Or he may say, he may just use the figures that he used during the pandemic. That's up to him. Whatever if he feels he doesn't
Oh,
need
I
to do the bids.
understand that, but
If he doesn't need to do the bids, he doesn't have to. That's why I didn't put bids in there. I said fact-based.
right, I understand that,
Whatever
but
he-
you're now, but what we need to do now is that are you withdrawing your original motion?
No,
Because you've
it's the same
changed it.
motion.
It
I
is
mean, I
not.
don't remember it word for word, but it's the
I
same
know that's
motion.
part of the problem of
La-
not
Larry
having.
and Karen, we're just going to stick to Robert's rules. And we are going to
Interesting.
state the motion, and then there's going to be an opportunity for discussion. The motion is to direct the superintendent to do research and take a fact-based approach to the proposal by soliciting feedback from stakeholders and provide information to the school committee so the school committee can take a vote.
Point of order.
Yes?
If we're sticking to Robert's Rules of Order, that's a new motion, so he needs to withdraw the original motion. I'm sorry, but if we're only going to stick to Robert's Rules of Order when I make a comment to ask for clarification, then we're going to stick to them all the time. Sorry, but
Thank
we're
you,
going to
Karen.
we're going to play right.
Well, I wish we had you here for every meeting to tell us how to run them.
Okay, Greg, hang tight.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, Greg.
Never mind.
We're going to give
I'll
Larry
withdraw
the...
the original motion and go with this motion.
All right, there is a opportunity to withdraw the motion, and Larry has made a new motion. I'll read it again for the opportunity for a second. This is to direct the superintendent to do research and take a fact-based approach to the proposal by soliciting feedback from stakeholders and provide information to the school committee so the school committee may take a vote. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? Alicia, can you hear us a little bit better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Very good. Did you have any comments or thoughts on that motion?
No, I mean, other than, I do think it's a good idea to maybe get a little bit more information from stakeholders outside of what was presented tonight. Could be useful for the school committee to make a well-informed decision. But I do think that, I mean, there were great points raised, so I think maybe diving into a little bit more information could be helpful.
Other discussion, comments? I will ask the superintendent a question similar to Greg's, possibly a little bit more specifically. If this process that is laid out in this motion takes until February, is that too late for the school committee to provide what you, I think, correctly identified as an appropriate vote for the school committee to take? Is that too late for you to then take the action that's necessary to make the change for September of '23?
To be honest, I would have to look at I'll have to think about that. I don't want to answer that in this very moment. The other piece of consideration of bringing this forward when we are, and again, all apologies, it is tonight, and there were many variables that brought us to this evening as opposed to last week. However, part of that is rolling this out in consideration of the budget. This will have, in theory, budgetary impact in terms of the way we plan. It's not, we're comfortable that it's not going to have a negative effect on the budget. It's just about how we budget and how we look at our budget. And so, trying to do those things together was sort of the spirit of bringing this forward now as well. So, we don't want to trip up the budget process and create undue work and delay budgets and those types of things. But I just want to point out that is a part of the variable of bringing that forward now as well. So,
Thank you. Other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. we'll do a roll call vote, and we'll start with Karen
Aye.
and Larry
Aye.
and Alicia
Aye.
and Greg.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, and that is unanimous. Thank you very much for the presentation and the information.
Vote aye.
I think we have a path forward for developing that. I'll call attention to our schedule that is coming up. We do have school committee meetings as early as January, of course. Our first meeting is on January 5th. Our second meeting is on January 19th. And although it may not be possible to have all of the information available at those times, if you had information that you wanted to provide really in an iterative fashion, I think that would be welcomed.
Great, thank you. I'd like to just thank our leadership team tonight for being here and supporting this and taking their time out of their evenings. So thank you all for being here. If there's no other questions for them, I'd like to dismiss them.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you all have a great holiday, too.
Enjoy.
Tomorrow, we have a concert at, I don't know, 9, 10:30, and 1:45, 3 different shows,
Oh, really?
5 different classes, each
Awesome.
show. It'll be great, it'll be cute.
Fun.
We like cute concerts.
Thank you all.
Our next agenda item is an update from our Board of Health. Tonight we have the Chair of the Board of Health, Mr. Keith Hent, with us. And so I'll invite Keith up to the microphone to provide an update to us from the BOH.
We don't have that.
Well, it's a school, so I'm glad to see our principals all just walked out.
Thank you, sir. Wow.
Thank you for having me this evening, Mr. Chair. Keith Kent, Chair of the Board of Health. So the purpose of meeting your board this evening is to give you a year-end update of where our town stands with our children, our age groups, our school district populations. What we have here is a comprehensive 3-page update I've put together where our school district stands, the age groups in our town, our population, and versus the Commonwealth on where we have standed so far during the pandemic. From time to time, I have heard members of the school committee ask, where do we stand in terms of vaccinations with COVID-19, and what are the individual age groups that the Department of Public Health has. One of the things you will see during this presentation is that as the numbers come in, and I've discussed this with Jim Aber, our health agent, as the numbers come in, they don't always quite coincide in terms of percentages if you do the math, percentages versus what the total population is of the age groups of the town and then such said town population. So you'll have to forgive a few percentage points off in numbers here and there because you have to understand as they roll in from the Commonwealth, there is then a little bit numerically a change in when they actually get figured into different branches of such said system at the Mass Department of Public Health. So I just want to make that, just so you know, just so you don't think it's my math. I can do the math, it's we only have what they give us. And I've talked with my fellow counterparts at other boards of health, different towns, including the Athol Board of Health, which I frequently talk with, and they run into the same thing. So we're going to start out with our school district age populations, which I converse with multiple teachers in town who ask me where we stand. The first stat we find, which is interesting, is the Mass Department of Public Health defines children ages 0 through 4. I'm not exactly what they consider a child age 0. If you can define a child age 0, I would encourage you to give me the definition of that. I find age 0 unique, but They list we have 516 children in town. Obviously, the younger you get, the more parents are extremely uncomfortable with getting that child vaccinated, and considerably so, because there's not much data on the younger you get if it's safe still in the minds of a lot of parents. Very controversial topic, obviously. And that's why we always tell people, if you're going to consider vaccinations, always have that conversation with your doctor, your primary medical physician. You know, make sure you have responsible conversation. It's somebody who's qualified and not something off social media where most people find the typical armchair quarterbacking, per se. So, and up to the age group of 4 in town, the DPH lists us as having 516 children, so you're kind of entering that pre-K age, and you have 5% partially and 2% fully vaccinated in town. Then when you start getting in through, you know, kindergarten and up, children ages 5 to 11 in town at this time, and these again are by, for anybody watching or listening, this is the newest information by the Mass Department of Public Health, just out last Thursday. So we're typing it for December 20th, date of this report. Mass Department of Public Health says in town we have 838 children ages 5 to 11. And again, these numbers do not match what is obviously in our school system, because we have school choice. Due to school choice between parochial schools, vocational schools, homeschooling, things of these natures, children being schooled and other possibilities out of district, things like online virtual schools and whatever. So naturally, again, the numbers that the DPH gives us for school committees will never truly match what you have in your town. So just because we have these residents in our town, all school districts, even though the committee understands it, to put it in layman's terms for any parents watching, the numbers will never match up because of all the variable options that a lot of people aren't aware of, Mr. Chair. So you have 838 children aged 5 to 11, so you have 27%, according to the DPH, are currently partially vaccinated in town and 24% fully. In the age group 12 to 15, you have 486 children in town, and you have 50%. You'll start seeing the increase as we now get into the middle school and high school age bracket. Winchington is up to 50% partially vaccinated and 46% fully vaccinated. Ages 16 to 19, even though most 19-year-old students are obviously out of high school on average at this point, we're up to 402 in the teenage bracket of 16 to 19. You really see an increase now. You see 60% partially vaccinated, 52% fully vaccinated. A lot of towns, when I called the DPH for clarification on this jump, it's because a lot of municipalities across the Commonwealth, as schools were reopening, this was, with a lot of Commonwealth schools, a mandate in the beginning of the reopening for school sports eligibility with a lot of municipalities. And that's why you saw more of this jump in that age group. And when you'll see a dotted line where we enter adulthood in the age groups of 20 to 29. Now this is where you'll see a consistent average in the higher vaccination brackets, even though Winchington is still one of the 10 lowest vaccinated municipalities out of all 351 in the Commonwealth. So you'll see at age 20 to 29, 60% partially and 53% fully vaccinated. 30 to 49, 63% partially, 57% fully. And just so you know, me and the health agent and I had a conversation about this. Ironically, these numbers in the last 15 to 16 months, each category is either unchanged completely through all school age brackets and adulthood. Each category is either unchanged or has only changed by, at the most, 2% in 15 to 16 months. They have become stagnant. They haven't changed. People, parents, and adults have come to the point where they basically feel like we've had enough. We're over it. We're where we want to be. I've spoken with multiple doctors, healthcare reps, and they've all said people are right now, they're just where they want to be, and the consensus is we're over it. So the vaccination numbers have not gone up in our town virtually at all in a year and a half. They have extremely stagnant numbers. So I guess this number, what I'm presenting to the school committee tonight, is not much different than it was when I came before you in August, to tell you the truth. That's why I wanted to provide you with an update, just so you know. If you're wondering if it changed, the answer is really not much. Ages 50 to 64, 86% partially and 80 fully. 65 to 74, there's where you see the big jump. People start becoming more concerned with, naturally, longevity of life. We start thinking about how long we want to live. Ages 65 to 74, greater than 95% partially and greater than 95% fully vaccinated. And ages 75 and up, they list this as just 630 people in town. And you have, greater than 95% partially and 89% fully. So in all, when you add the numbers up, even though the age groups tend to vary, you have DPH currently lists Wenchington as 10,364 residents, but I talked about this number with the health agent. We know that even with elementary, middle, high school students and adulthood, we do have that resident population, as with every community, as undefined, homeless, quote, you might hear the term couch surfing sometime, or home surfing. And these are unfortunately people who, especially during the pandemic, fell upon hard times, may have lost a relative during the pandemic, may have lost their apartment. There's a huge, huge housing shortage right now. People can't find housing, Mr. Chair, because as homes have become incredibly expensive, people are now not moving out of their apartments to buy homes because of this, as a health agent and I have discussed, because they can't afford homes. They're staying in the apartments. If apartments aren't being built, then apartments aren't becoming available, and people can't find a place to move out to. It's a reciprocating cycle that is self-feeding, and it's not changing right now. So we estimate a minimum of 150 people, the health agent and I feel, is a good minimum safety net for homeless people in town. And quite honestly, when I call the DPH and I talk to them, that number is most likely a greater variable than that, but this is like just a minimum safety. So we call it 10,500 residents, but with that safety minimum, it's probably honestly quite more, to be honest. The running joke, women are always, and ladies are always more likely to go to a doctor than stubborn men are. Well, the numbers prove it. The DPH states that females in town are 71% partially and 63% fully vaccinated for 3,033 of 5,163 female residents in Wenchington at this time. And males are 63% partially vaccinated for COVID-19 and 56% fully for 2,980 of 5,201. Overall, at this time, Wenchington is 67% partially and 61% fully vaccinated. If you go back 15, 16 months, Wenchington was 57% fully vaccinated as a town. So in literally 15 to 16 months, as an entire town, throughout the entire spectrum of all age groups, from birth to the eldest Wenchington resident, we've only moved 4% in 15 to 16 months. The numbers are virtually unchanged. If you look at page 2, I have given you, as a school district, as our town, so we have the WPS school district town SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 positivity chart, which is also representative of the entire town. But as we are a single municipal school district town, as a Board of Health, I wanted to present our tracking to you. I track these numbers every week when the numbers come out from the DPH Thursday at 5 p.m. with the weekly updates to know where we stand. We're doing better this year in the sense of our percent positivities haven't got better, but at least this year, knock on wood, thank God, we don't have DESE asking us, Mr. King, for a school closure. Thank God. So with that, we're open. So when the school year began in September 1, I'm giving it as a Thursday hypothetical, we were at 6.4% positivity. If you look at your charts where I kind of gave you a sliding scale, we were under the Omicron BA.5 variant. Notice September 8th, we go to 8.68. September 15th, 11.1. September 22nd, 11.343 positivity. September 29th, 11.76. These are all well above the state average. September 10th, 10.91, October 6th. October 13th, 11.07, October 20th, 12.02, October 27th, 10.5. Again, on average, one of the highest on average in the state. In November, now here's where it gets interesting, and I called the DPH for a better understanding, just as a Board of Health, because that's our job. I called the DPH for a better understanding of it. On on November 3rd, we go down to 7.85% positivity of a town, and on November 10th, 7.8, and these are obviously the numbers that our school children in our school district live in. And that was basically, when I talked to the DPH, the end of Omicron, because that is when we started reaching, at that point, sort of a herd immunity with Omicron. And just like the last 2 years before it, that's when the virus goes and mutates, because even with the flu, just like with the flu, that's what viruses do. They've always mutated, they're always gonna, and the bottom line is, we have to learn how to live with it. We're always gonna have to learn how to live with it. It's not gonna go anywhere. So the medications, thankfully, are getting better, such as Plaxavid. My half-sister's been on it a couple of times. It's helped her greatly. Thank God for science with that. There's other medications that are out there, so our medications are coming along during this cycle, which are great. So at the end of November, when we were sort of reaching a herd immunity for sense with Omicron, it goes and changes, enter BQ.1 and BQ.1.1, and then look what happens. We go from 7.8 as a town to 9.62, 9.74, 9.86. 2 weeks ago, 13.01% positivity, and then last Thursday, 10.12. So maybe we'll get lucky, and maybe this week it'll go down a little bit more. That'd be nice to see. But this is what happens. Again, viruses always mutate, and they always will. But these numbers also represent what our positivity is in our school district, as we are a single school district municipality and not regional. So that's kind of why there is the significance to that. We don't share another town, such as the NRSD next door, which last week, well, right now, the NRSD is 11% positive in Templeton and 20% positive in Phillipston. Phillipston's been varying 10 to 20% for off and on for 2 months. So they've been extremely high over there.
Mr. Ken?
Yes, sir.
We have a question.
Oh, please.
Do you think, looking at the dates, it seems to spike whenever we have family events, like Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
or when people are home?
Large indoor gatherings.
Right, so it seems to spike around then. So I know that they came down 3% in your last one, but we're going into Christmas now and the New Year's and whatnot. You expecting a spike?
Honestly, I can't really vouch for that. One, this BQ.1 and BQ.1.1 is sort of, the data so far is strong flu-like symptoms, which is what Omicron was. But right now, more of a threat than this is the triple threat that all the doctors and hospitals have been talking about of the flu, RSV, with lung issues, the flu, RSV, and COVID at the same time. And there is a massive shortage in many hospitals right now of hospital beds. I personally know of people who have had to go all the way to southern Connecticut to get a hospital bed in the last few weeks from the Gardner, Athol, and Winchington area. Southern Connecticut. Imagine having to go there to see your relatives. And they've had literally the flu, not even COVID, to get a hospital bed in southern Connecticut. So far, I mean, the good news is, under Omicron last year, we had to shut down our school system with a DESI request to Thad King, and the Board of Health had to scramble, making over 20 phone calls in an hour and a half to get an emergency meeting to shut down the schools, because you only had 60 kids out of 260 who were able to go. At that point, there's no sense in even keeping the lights on. And then thankfully, our school district, and Mr. King was able to get special DESI dispensation to go back to online learning, and thank God our district was still set up for it at that time to have that unique capability, whereas a lot of districts in the Commonwealth didn't have it. Under this BQ.1 and BQ.1.1, we're very fortunate right now that we're not seeing the amount of students out of school that we saw last year under Omicron. So while the virus mutated, we're very fortunate right now that we're not having the problems that we had last year. Thank God for our kids and our parents. I consider it a blessing. You know, it's good. So, you know, like I said, you know, I'm just here. It's our job to track it as a Board of Health. It's our job to keep public health officials and our boards informed. But a lot of municipalities are not staying this in depth. They're kind of, people can say we're over it, but saying you're over it doesn't make it go away. Saying you're over it's not addressing the problem. If it gets worse, you're less prepared for it. So my point as chair of the Board of Health is, don't be a worrywart and don't be overcautious. Just be knowledgeable so you have the data and have the capability to react only if you need it. Just have the ability only if you need it. But don't be an overreactionist. Just have it if you need it. And that is why I worked with Mr. Jeremiah Hay from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Health and Human Services to get our district, as you know, all of these COVID tests that we got, mainly for our school district, more so than our town, just so we have them if we need them. Because right now, with the price of food and Christmas shopping and home heating oil or any holiday shopping that you may do for any religion, any kind of holiday shopping, you know, people are strapped financially and they can't afford these $20 pop COVID tests. So thankfully, with the help of HHS, I reached out to them and I gave them all our numbers, but I want our district to know, when I spoke to Mr. Jeremiah Hay of Strategic Strategy at HHS, when I said, we had to close down our schools last year per a DESI request, the phone went silent and he said, that was your town? They literally remembered us at HHS. That's not the way I want Winchington to be remembered. You know, as chair of the Board of Health and the health agent, that's not how we want to be remembered. So our health agent just got done speaking with HHS again, and I want to let the school committee know the good news is we just put in, through the health agent, James Abier, for another 1,000 tests, as the current tests we have are set to expire January 28th with the COVID 6-month FDA extension. We now have another 1,000 tests coming in. We're going to be storing them mostly at the fire department. We will get some at the town hall office for after the holidays are over, but they will be in probably within a month and a half. And these new round of iHealth lab tests we're getting in only to help save, they're designed, we get them to help save the public money. We want to help save our residents money. And these will be good until the month of June, sometime in the month of June. We don't have the date yet, but they'll be good till the month of June. And I told James, we really need you to stay on top of this. And our health agent is just one person with no assistants. He's a very busy individual. And as soon as HHS reached out to our public health department, Jim and I talked, and he goes, Keith, what are you thinking? As many as last time? I said, no, I don't think as many as we just did. Because this round, we got 2,760, and it looks like we're not going to use that many. So we said, let's go with 1,000, because Mr. Hay at HHS told us if we need more, we can ask for more. So it's nice to know we have that cushion to fall back on for the town of Winchington. But the whole point of myself reaching out to him was to save our residents money and to have them for our residents if they need them, because our residents are struggling. And as you said it yourself earlier, our community has unique financial challenges. So let's save our residents money when we can and be proactive. And the whole point of getting our tests, as I told Mr. King in his office before, was if we want to help our students know, because DESE and the Mass Department of Education, they basically stopped providing these test kits this academic year for our students. And that was one of the reasons I reached out to Mr. Hay at Mass Executive Office at HHS, was because if they weren't going to provide them for our students, and our town financially needs help, and our parents need help, well, then we've got to get it from somewhere else to help these kids and help our parents. And that's why we did it. And that was the whole point of me telling the health agent I wanted to apply for them. So now the health agent has just applied for this round, God bless him, and now we've got this next round coming in. So they'll be there if we need them for our school nurses.
Well, thank you for all you do. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Chief.
It was
Thank the
great-
school district for all they do.
Great information to have. Thank you so much.
Yep. And when you get to it, at your leisure, on your back page is where we stand as a state, where we stand nationally. And ironically, interesting footnote before we end, we border the state of New Hampshire and all of the Massachusetts states in terms of where, and I'm not here to fault anybody. If they want to get vaccinated, great. If they don't want to get vaccinated, it's a personal choice. It's not me to tell them it's right or wrong. But if you look at the Massachusetts states, all New England states are in the top 10, and we border the state of New Hampshire. Interesting footnote, our vaccination numbers were one of the 10 lowest in 351 cities and towns. We border the state of New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is all the way down at number 20 on the vaccination list. Interesting footnote, considering where we stand with our constant higher numbers, where we border and where they are bordering us. That is an interesting numerical footnote. So the numbers don't lie. Only human beings can make numbers lie. It's not my job to say things are good or bad or what somebody should do. It's my job as chair of the Board of Health only to provide the data. It's like news reporting. It's not somebody's job to tell you what you should think. It's somebody's job to give you the data and let you make your mind up for you. That's true reporting.
Thank you.
So that's why I wanted to present this to your school district and make sure you're all as informed as you can be.
Thank you, Mr. Kent.
Thanks, Keith.
Questions for Keith before he departs?
All set.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks, Keith.
holiday, Keith.
May you all have the best holiday you can have and enjoy your time with your loved ones and have a safe and great holiday, everybody.
You too.
You too.
Like the tie.
I am now off to go steal some roast beef from Miss Cindy Lou Who. Enjoy.
All right, thank you for that. The next item on our agenda is a graduation discussion. I believe that Larry might have been the one to propose this as an agenda item, so I'll look to him before the superintendent to possibly set us up for what we need to discuss tonight.
What have we discussed?
Well, I brought it up before because I would like to know what the plan is for graduation for 100 years or more. We had a tradition of, senior week, but it also involved the community with the alumni having a banquet on Saturday night where they honored the students and also gave out their scholarships and whatnot. And that was something unique to our community. I hadn't seen that, and the 5 other school districts I worked in, I'd never seen that other than here, and I just think it was a great thing. I know that I'd had a conversation with Ms. Rondo and Mr. King about doing something with the alumni. It might look differently than it has the last 100 years, but COVID really destroyed that alumni participation in graduation. So I was hoping that somewhere in your plan for senior week, that we could brainstorm some way to involve the community and, the senior reception, with the grand march and all that stuff, that involves the community, which is great. And then the alumni banquet involved alumni, people who don't live here anymore, but they come back. It's amazing how many people come back for the reunions and whatnot. So I know you guys start your planning pretty early, and I just wondered if, what's on the radar, and if we can somehow incorporate the tradition of the alumni into into the
So
tradition.
I'm laughing at myself a little bit, Mr. Murphy. I'm going to say that we do start planning early, but not always on day 73 of school. But that being said, my understanding of that, and I've only been able to participate in that 1 year. So my first year here was 18, 19, and that's the last year we actually held the alumni dinner. And I think that we had our full traditional sort of graduation week that year. My understanding, and correct, there are people in here who participated in this much longer than I, is that the alumni piece was that we were actually the invited members to that as opposed to the organizers of that. And so I understand last year that there was some attempts, but it just, we didn't have, they being the Alumni Association, didn't have the folks to sort of pull that off last year in a planned out way. So I think we would be happy to participate in anything and help maybe work with the Alumni Association if that still exists. I got to be honest, like I'm not sure who's still participating on that Alumni Association, if you want the truth. But I one of the great things in this town was that night for me. And I said this that night. Now, I say it again. I come from a town that is significantly larger, and I don't mean Groton, but in Texas. Meaning, graduating with over 2,000 students in a town of, over 50,000 students. And it's the home to J.C. Penney and EDS and many large corporations. And that town doesn't contribute the amount of money that this small town did to its graduates in the way they did. So it was very moving, and I would love to see that tradition continued. I'm just, to be honest, I think it's going to take more than a couple of folks in this room to get that tradition continued, but it's certainly something that I don't think anybody wants to see go away. It's a fantastic tradition in Winchendon, but I think we need to get some heads together, and if you want to help with that and bring some folks together, I would love to continue that conversation, and maybe it does need to be revamped in terms of the way we approach it and modernized, but I think it's a tradition that should absolutely continue in the way we think about our graduation and appreciation of our students and our alumni.
Mr. Chair?
Do we have any preliminary plans for
hold on a
each
second,
day?
Larry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to ask Larry, I don't know, do we have the names of folks that are still involved with their graduating classes? Does Franny have those by any chance? I mean, is there a way of getting the former graduating classes, the alumni classes, to, I guess, talk them into holding their reunions the weekend of graduation?
I would say yes, there is a way to do that. I know that Jennifer Haddad was on that committee. Some of the people that were on there may still have the list. I know Maureen Provost was on that committee for.
Oh, really?
She wasn't on last year, but I think she was on the few years before. She was on the year that, the last one we did. There's people out there that have done it in the past and have done it. And some of them have done it for many years, and they've decided to pull back from doing it. And then COVID just threw everything into the, but amazingly enough, they still gave scholarships last year. Even though they didn't have the banquet. They still, now they generate a lot of the money from the banquet, from the alumni banquet. That's where they get the money for the scholarships. So without the banquet, I don't know where they got the money. I'm happy they did.
Yeah.
But I would like to see the tradition come back, and I'm not expecting the school to do it. I just want to make sure that that if we can get our act together, that we still have a night that's open, that, you're not having events or something, so we can't make it happen.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
And this is really a question for Larry. So is this something that's coordinated? Like, is this an alumni banquet, and you invite the graduates that you're giving the scholarships to, or all the
We
graduates?
provide a dinner and a dance for all the graduates.
Okay,
And at that, after the dinner, they present
Present
scholarships.
scholarships, and then you have a
They
dance.
You know, they have a DJ and stuff, and they have dancing after.
Okay.
Usually the kids take off, but the alumni sticks around.
So what you're looking for is to make sure that there's a date set aside for that. So that's basically what we need to make sure that that hopefully if you guys can, if the alumni group can get that off the ground, that Mr. King doesn't schedule something super fun that would take all the graduates away from it.
Right, so the graduates wouldn't be
Okay.
available.
Just for the record, Mr. King doesn't plan that.
Well, I
There was a
understand,
time,
well,
but
I don't know,
there are
if
those
we
in
could
the
get,
audience
if we
that-
could get
that
that
plan
Seymour
grad-
plant back and I could get them to feed you to it,
They
you know,
plan
that might
graduation
take
and,
precedent.
So, Steph, that's my only thing is and I know that we talked before, I don't know if we can pull off the banquet, but maybe there's something else we could do. We talked about doing something at the high school, like maybe have the banquet at the high school, or, I don't know, we could brainstorm some things. I just like to keep the alumni involved, because a lot of classes come back for their class reunion that weekend. Specifically for that weekend, so that they can go to the alumni banquet and see other classes. We held ours last June, my class. It was our 50th reunion, but put a 0 on the end.
Can I ask another question?
So we had ours June 4th, I think, when graduation was. That's the day that we had it. So, anyway, that's all I'm saying. I just hope that there's room and space, because it was a great tradition. I'd like to keep that, and I'd like to keep the money rolling for the kids, you know, keep the scholarships coming. And, you know, they passed the hat that night, and people, I remember one alumni, when you were there, one guy put in $2,500 that night.
Wow.
Wasn't me, but.
Karen, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say, maybe if there's a graduation, I know that Ms. Rondo ends up doing a lot of the planning and everything, but maybe if, yes, all of it, but I, you know, if, maybe you should start a graduation, committee or something, if you can. I know that's impossible. However, maybe you can get.
We can talk.
You can
How's
get
that?
Mr. Murphy to volunteer to help, but somehow I think that's something that they can discuss.
We could,
Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead.
As you're making your way up, just remember, Larry volunteered.
Barry volunteered. You have witnesses, and it's recorded.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Stephanie Rondo, Murdoch High School. So we typically hold our graduation, as you know, the first Sunday in June, but that is absolutely dependent upon the scheduled last day of school. So if we end up having more than 5 snow days, then there is a possibility that we need to move that graduation to the next Sunday. So the last several years, it has typically been, we have class day on Thursday, which is an in-school celebration. Friday night is prom, Saturday night is alumni banquet, and Sunday is graduation. So as of right now, our prom is scheduled for May 19th, because we are going to be taking the kids on a Spirit of Boston Harbor cruise for prom. And then we do have class day scheduled for that Thursday, June 1st-ish, whatever that Thursday is. So we have nothing scheduled on that Friday evening. We have nothing scheduled on that Saturday evening. The last 2 years, Officer Flagg and I applied for and received a grant from the district attorney's office to have an alternate celebration, if you will. So we had an outside, like, drive-in movie at the school to give the kids something to do, keep them out of trouble, if you will, because we did not have the alumni banquet on that Saturday. And then if, the schedule allows, we will have graduation on that first Sunday. When you're talking about a committee to do the planning, it's pretty much me and Mrs. Wheeler, who is a keeper of traditions at the school. As we have not a very large staff, we have less than 30 on our high school staff, Some of them are alums and are aware of the tradition as well, but it is ever increasingly difficult to get involvement from other folks, you know, to do these things that are frankly unpaid. So my involvement with the alumni banquet over the years, I've sort of taken on, if you recall, Mr. Kraniak used to do a lot of this, and my role at alumni banquet is usually one of service, because you know, the kids need someone to sort of make sure that they have what they need with regard to beverages and things like that. And then just helping the class advisor, whoever it is, that particular night. And as you said, Mr. Murphy, most of the kids come, they are guests of the alumni, they have dinner, they get their scholarships, and then they bug out, right? So, you know, again, I am not a member of the Alumni Association, but I am, you know, more than happy to work with folks if that is something that's going to continue going on, and we certainly would make time in the schedule for it. And that's kind of where we are right now. So I don't know if you have other questions I can answer, but.
No, we'll talk.
Okay.
We'll talk.
I was just gonna say, I don't know about today's teenagers, but I can remember we used to be able to get in plenty of trouble at the drive-in, so you might
Sure.
want to think that one
Right.
through.
Oh, Greg.
Those Westminster kids.
Yeah.
Any other questions, discussion on graduation, or any other questions for Ms. Rondeau while she's here? Thank you. All right, that brings us to old business. I don't think we have any.
No.
I don't think we do, nope. Okay.
No.
And then that brings us to future agenda items. We do have the ELA curriculum adoption on there, which is sort of part of those monthly curricular updates that the superintendent has started to do, and I'm sure that that will be on a future agenda. Any other future agenda items?
Not at this point.
I'm going to add we'll wordsmith this later, but an update on the motion that passed this evening regarding the reorganization at either a single interval or multiple intervals. You know, you can provide updates to the school committee.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mid-year review of the superintendent
yeah,
should be a future item.
Okay. All right. Karen, we are on future agenda items. Any future agenda items that you have?
I would like to give a report at some point on some of the things from the MAS conference.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we
I'm sure it was great.
it was awesome, except for the COVID part. No,
I'm glad
about-
he didn't go.
I know.
Mask co-
I'm glad a lot of you didn't go. About
Mask.
50 of us came back with COVID.
And we've got that on there as an update, mass conference update. Fantastic. Other other items?
If I think of anything, I'll let you know.
All right. And we, friends, after, 2.5 hours, are at the closing comments. And we'll take volunteers. Who wants to go first? Greg wants to go first.
No, they say discretion is the better part of valor, so I'm gonna pass.
Very good. Alicia, any closing comments tonight?
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief. Just like to express a lot of gratitude for the faculty and staff for everything they provide to our students in the Winchton Public Schools. And I am looking forward to a very productive and healthy and thoughtful 2023.
Fantastic, thank you. Larry?
I'd like to echo those thoughts from Alicia. I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season, and I hope it's a healthy season, and we start the new year hitting the ground running, and we have a very productive 2023.
Fantastic. Karen?
I would like to reiterate that one thing that Keith said, the COVID has not gone away. And I'm not going to tell anybody to get vaccinated or not vaccinated. There are no cooties at my house, unlike poor Ryan, and I hope you don't get the cooties. I unfortunately did come back from the mass conference. Myself and several of us came back from it with, I believe it was the new variant, and I was sent for infusion treatment. That's how bad I got. So you will see me probably wearing a mask at all times, because having COVID 3 times in the past year and a half, having it twice in 4 months, and having long COVID symptoms means I am not messing with this anymore, so I'm not taking chances. So I really hope everybody has a very healthy and happy holidays. I hope everybody enjoys them, and I want to say thank you very much to all of our staff and all the hard work you do. I don't know how you do it every day. I really do appreciate everything you do for our children and families in this community. The administration, the same goes. I don't know how you do it, especially with all the budget stuff. I do not envy you that. I do not look forward to, I know you don't look forward to getting those cherry sheets at all, especially late. And I want to thank my colleagues for all the work that you've done for the students and the families of the community. And thank you to the parents and the students who have done the hard work too. Have great holidays.
Great, thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful, happy holiday.
To adjourn.
And take a motion to adjourn. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we are adjourned. Thank you, Alicia.